Welcome back to my channel, where we uncover the forgotten corners of the past. Today, I'm taking you into a story about the sinister legacy of the Blackwood family that you might have never heard before. A mystery buried in the dust of time, a truth that will send shivers down your spine. But before we embark on this journey, take a moment to let me know where are you listening to this story from. That helps me understand how far these secrets have traveled. And if this story truly captivates you, if it makes you ponder, don't hesitate to give me a like and subscribe to the channel to keep me going. Together, we'll explore the darkest pages of history, and you won't want to miss a thing. In the heart of the South Carolina lowlands, where the air hangs heavy with secrets and Spanish moss drapes from ancient oaks like the tattered veils of forgotten mourners, there stands a ruin few dare to approach after nightfall. Locals call it Angel's Rest Chapel, though its true name has long since been swallowed by the mud and the marsh. This is a place where the past refuses to die. Every stone seems to pulse with the memory of suffering. And if you listen closely, the wind itself carries the faintest echoes of prayers that were never answered. Here, amid the crumbling gravestones and suffocating silence, the story of the Whitworth family begins, a story so steeped in darkness that even the bravest chroniclers have hesitated to record it. More than 1,800 souls vanished without a trace from this land. Their names were erased, their fates unspoken, for generations. The truth was buried beneath layers of respectability, charity, and piety. But the land remembers. The land always remembers. What could drive a family, revered as pillars of their community, to orchestrate such horror beneath the guise of salvation? What secrets festered in the shadows of Saraphim's grace? How did the Whitworths manage to keep their hands clean while the soil beneath their feet grew ever darker with each passing year? These are the questions that haunt the ruins. And perhaps, if one is willing to look closely enough, the answers still linger in the dust and the silence. To understand how such evil could flourish, one must first step back into the world that gave birth to it. South Carolina in the late 18th century was a land of contradictions, lush, fertile, and yet unforgiving. Rice plantations stretched endlessly toward the horizon, their emerald fields masking the suffering of those who toiled within them. The social order was as rigid as the tides that flooded the marshes, and the boundaries between master and slave, salvation and damnation, were drawn in blood. Saraphim's Grace, the Whitworth estate, lay 30 miles inland from Charleston, perched on a slight rise above the swamps. The main house, a grand Georgian structure with weathered columns and shuttered windows, looked out over a landscape that seemed both timeless and haunted. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. The only sounds were the distant calls of night birds and the slow, relentless drip of water from moss-laden branches. It was a world apart, insulated from the chaos of the young republic, where the wounds of revolution still bled and the future was uncertain. Here, tradition reigned supreme, and the church was both a sanctuary and a weapon. According to records from the era, the Whitworths were known for their generosity, their piety, and their unwavering commitment to the community. Yet beneath this veneer of virtue, something far more sinister was taking root. Angel's Rest Chapel, completed in 1788, was unlike any other chapel in the region. Its stained glass windows depicted not scenes of hope or redemption, but visions of judgment and torment. The altar, carved from dark wood, bore the image of a sword-wielding angel casting the damned into the abyss. Beneath the sanctuary, hidden from the eyes of the faithful, lay a labyrinth of stone corridors and locked doors, a place where the desperate and the lost were promised salvation, only to find oblivion. The isolation of Saraphim's grace was both a shield and a snare. It allowed the Whitworths to cultivate an image of benevolence, hosting lavish gatherings and contributing to local charities, while at the same time conducting their true business in the shadows. The marshes swallowed sound and memory alike. Those who disappeared were quickly forgotten, their absence explained away by the endless churn of plantation life. Yet, for all its beauty, the land itself seemed to conspire in the family's deception. The fog that rolled in from the river each morning blurred the boundaries between reality and nightmare. The cypress trees, gnarled and ancient, stood as silent witnesses to the rituals that unfolded beneath their branches. The people enslaved, impoverished, or simply desperate had little choice but to accept the Whitworths' authority, even as rumors of strange happenings began to circulate in hushed tones. It was in this world, suspended between the old and the new, the sacred and the profane, that the Whitworth family thrived. Gabriel Whitworth, the patriarch, was a man of imposing stature and icy composure. His silver hair and piercing gaze commanded respect. His voice, cultured, resonant, unwavering, could fill a chapel with hope or reduce a grown man to trembling silence. He was, by all accounts, a visionary, a leader, and a man utterly convinced of his own righteousness. Constance Whitworth, his wife, was the embodiment of Southern grace, delicate, ethereal, and always impeccably composed. Yet those who looked closely into her eyes sometimes glimpsed a shadow, a flicker of something broken and unreachable. She moved through the world like a ghost, untouched by the labor and suffering that sustained her family's wealth. Their children were each remarkable in their own unsettling way. Ezekiel, the eldest son, inherited his father's intelligence, but none of his restraint. There was a cruelty in his smile, a coldness in his eyes that unsettled even those closest to him. Miriam, the eldest daughter, was perhaps the most dangerous of all her beauty and charm, masking a talent for manipulation that could turn hope into despair with a single word. The twins, Cain and Abel, were a study in contrasts. Cain, broad-shouldered and silent, exuded a physical menace, while Abel, slighter and more thoughtful, devoted his considerable intellect to devising new methods of extracting secrets from unwilling lips. Lilith, the youngest, was still a girl in years, but already possessed an unsettling maturity. Her innocence was a mask, carefully cultivated by Gabriel, who saw in her the future of the family's enterprise. Michael Whitworth, Gabriel's brother, served as the estate's overseer, a man whose weathered face and quiet efficiency concealed a mind as sharp and calculating as any in the family. His daughters, Mercy and Grace, were being raised alongside their cousins, steeped in the peculiar theology that justified the family's every action. And then there was Saraphim Whitworth, the youngest brother, whose medical training had been twisted into something monstrous, thin to the point of gauntness, with pale green eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone. Saraphim was the architect of the horrors that unfolded beneath the chapel. His knowledge of anatomy was unparalleled, and his experiments meticulously recorded in journals that would one day shock even the most hardened investigators, blurred the line between science and sadism. 2. The outside world. The Whitworths were paragons of virtue. They attended church every Sunday, hosted charity events, and offered sanctuary to the desperate. But within the walls of Saraphim's grace, a different reality prevailed. The family's private gatherings were marked by an eerie silence, broken only by the clink of crystal and the low murmur of voices discussing matters that no outsider could ever understand. There was a sense of unease that permeated every room, a feeling that something was always watching, always waiting. It was in the small details that the truth began to reveal itself. The way Ezekiel's smile never quite reached his eyes. The way Miriam lingered a moment too long in the company of the vulnerable. The way Cain's hands, so capable and strong, seemed made for violence. The way Abel's notebooks filled with diagrams and codes, each page a testament to a mind obsessed with control. Lilith's quiet observations, her uncanny ability to sense fear, marked her as both a child and a predator in the making. Even the servants, who moved through the house with downcast eyes and hurried steps, sensed that the Whitworths were not like other families. Whispers of strange rituals, of midnight visitors who never returned, of cries muffled by stone and distance, began to circulate among the enslaved and the free alike. Yet no one dared speak openly, for the Whitworths' reach extended far beyond the boundaries of their estate. According to fragmented accounts preserved in local archives, the first signs of trouble were subtle. A missing field hand here, a runaway who vanished without a trace, a traveler who failed to reach his destination. Each disappearance was explained away, rationalized, or simply ignored. But as the years passed, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. Angel's Rest Chapel, once a beacon of hope, had become a place of dread, a labyrinth where the line between salvation and damnation was drawn not by God, but by the hand of man. And so, the stage was set. The land, the people, and the family were all bound together by a web of secrets and lies, each thread pulled tighter with every passing year. The Whitworths stood at the center, their faces serene, their hearts untouched by pity, their hands stained with the blood of those who had trusted them. Yet even in the depths of their depravity, there remained the faintest glimmer of doubt, a question, unspoken and unresolved, that would one day threaten to unravel everything they had built. For in the end, no secret can remain buried forever. The land remembers, and so do the dead. The illusion of sanctuary at Saraphim's Grace was as carefully constructed as the chapel's stained glass windows, each fragment of colored glass hiding a darker truth behind its beauty. For years, the Whitworths' reputation as benefactors and protectors of the desperate had gone unchallenged. Word spread quietly through the slave quarters, and among the downtrodden Angel's Rest Chapel was a place of refuge, a beacon for those seeking freedom from the chains of the South. The stories were always the same tales of food, shelter, and a secret path to the north, whispered with hope in the dead of night. But hope, in this place, was a weapon. The Whitworths themselves had sown these rumors, their network of informants and collaborators ensuring that the legend of sanctuary reached the ears of the most desperate. Each detail was meticulously crafted: the location of the chapel, the passwords to gain entry, even the names of supposed escapees who had found their way to freedom. The deception was so complete that even the local clergy, like Reverend Josiah Blackwood, lent their voices to the myth, offering prayers for the lost while quietly passing information to Gabriel and his kin. It was not long before the first disappearances began to trouble the edges of local memory. A field hand who had spoken of running north vanished one night, his absence explained away as the work of bounty hunters. A young woman, seen entering the chapel with a child, was never seen again. The Whitworths expressed concern, offered rewards, and joined the search parties, their faces masks of sympathy. Yet, behind closed doors, the family's true nature revealed itself in chilling detail. Inside the sanctuary, the rituals of welcome were as precise as any liturgy. Miriam greeted new arrivals with a gentle smile, her words soft and reassuring. She offered bread, clean water, and a place to rest, explaining that the family needed to verify their stories before helping them continue north. This waiting period, she insisted, was for their own safety. In truth, it was the first step in a process designed to strip away hope and extract every secret the desperate might possess. Cain and Abel, the twins, played their roles with disturbing ease. Cain, posing as a fellow runaway, shared tales of escape and survival, encouraging others to confide in him. Abel, ever watchful, took careful notes, cross-referencing details and searching for inconsistencies. Lilith, with a childlike innocence, was the perfect lure for mothers and children, her presence a balm that masked the danger lurking beneath the surface. The chapel's basement, hidden behind a false altar, was a world apart from the sanctuary above. Here, the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something far more sinister. The walls, lined with iron rings and heavy chains, bore silent witness to the suffering that unfolded within. Dr. Saraphim Whitworth presided over this domain, his surgical instruments gleaming in the candlelight. He was a master of anatomy, his knowledge used not to heal, but to prolong agony and extract information with clinical precision. According to documents unearthed decades later, the Whitworths maintained meticulous records of every soul who passed through their hands. Each victim was assigned a number, their physical description, background, and the intelligence they provided carefully catalogued. These ledgers, preserved in secret, would one day become the most damning evidence against the family, a testament to the scale and organization of their crimes. As the months passed, the pattern of disappearances grew impossible to ignore. The local community, once eager to believe in the Whitworths' benevolence, began to whisper of curses and restless spirits. Some claimed to hear cries in the night, carried on the wind from the direction of the chapel. Others spoke of strange lights flickering in the marsh, or of shadows moving among the gravestones long after midnight. Yet, for every voice raised in suspicion, there were two more eager to defend the family's honor, to dismiss the rumors as the fevered imaginings of the superstitious and the envious. The pressure within Saraphim's grace mounted with each passing season. The Whitworths, ever vigilant, refined their methods. Ezekiel developed a system for categorizing new arrivals, determining who might possess valuable information and who could be disposed of quickly. Miriam honed her skills of persuasion, coaxing secrets from the lips of the terrified with a touch and a whisper. Cain and Abel perfected their roles as interrogators, their methods growing more efficient and more cruel with every victim. The family's network expanded, drawing in new collaborators from neighboring plantations and distant cities. Dr. Edmund Thorne, a physician from Charleston, provided forged death certificates and facilitated the sale of bodies to medical schools in the North. Captain Marcus Fulton, a notorious slave catcher, used the intelligence gathered by the Whitworths to track down escapees and collect bounties. Even Reverend Blackwood, whose sermons thundered with calls for redemption, was complicit, his prayers masking a heart hardened by ambition and fear. The sense of dread that permeated Saraphim's grace was palpable. Servants moved through the halls with downcast eyes, their silence a shield against the horrors they witnessed. The enslaved whispered of ghosts and demons, of a curse that clung to the land and the family alike. Yet, for all their fear, none dared speak openly. The Whitworths' reach was long, and their vengeance swift. It was during the autumn of 1791, after a series of devastating storms had ravaged the Low Country, that the family's operation reached its zenith. The chaos and hardship drove more enslaved people to attempt escape. An Angel's Rest Chapel became a magnet for the desperate. In a single month, 43 souls arrived at the chapel, each one hoping for deliverance. None would ever leave. The interrogations grew more intense, the methods more refined. Dr. Sari's journals from this period later discovered hidden within the walls of the ruined chapel, describe in chilling detail the techniques he employed to break the will of his subjects. Pressure points, nerve pathways, psychological manipulation. Each tool was wielded with the precision of a craftsman and the detachment of a scientist. The goal was not merely to extract information, but to destroy hope itself. As the family's crimes escalated, so too did the risks. The community's suspicions deepened, and the Whitworths responded with ever greater displays of piety and generosity. Gabriel increased his donations to local churches, hosted elaborate feasts, and offered aid to those affected by the storms. Constance organized charity drives and became renowned for her needlework, her delicate hands weaving beauty even as her mind retreated from the horrors around her. Yet, beneath the surface, the web of secrets grew ever more tangled. The family's ledgers revealed patterns, escape routes compromised, safe houses betrayed, entire networks of the Underground Railroad dismantled by the intelligence extracted from the doomed. The profits from the sale of bodies and information flowed north, enriching not only the Whitworths, but their growing circle of accomplices. It was at this point that the true scale of the conspiracy began to emerge. The Southern Redemption Society, as the family's secret society came to be known, extended its reach far beyond the borders of Seraphim's grace. Monthly gatherings, disguised as religious revivals, brought together plantation owners, merchants, physicians, and even ministers from across the South. Dues were paid, profits shared, and strategies devised to expand the network and evade detection. The society's influence was insidious, its members bound by a shared belief in their own righteousness and a willingness to do whatever was necessary to maintain their power. Dr. Thorne's medical credentials lent legitimacy to the operation, while Captain Fulton's men ensured that no escapee could ever threaten the family's secrets. Reverend Blackwood, ever the chameleon, used his pulpit to identify potential victims and to silence those who might question the Whitworths' virtue. The rituals of the society were as elaborate as they were chilling. Gabriel delivered sermons on predestination and divine justice, twisting scripture to justify the family's actions. Dr. Saraphim provided instruction in the art of interrogation, his lessons blending medical science with psychological torment. Miriam taught the arts of persuasion and manipulation, her students learning to turn compassion into a weapon. It was during one such gathering that a new figure entered the story, a man whose presence would ultimately threaten to unravel the entire web of deceit. Samuel Washington, a free black man from Baltimore, arrived at Saraphim's grace under the guise of a runaway seeking sanctuary. In reality, he was an agent of the abolitionist network sent to investigate the growing number of disappearances in the region. His courage and cunning would set in motion a chain of events that neither the Whitworths nor their allies could foresee. Samuel's arrival was met with the usual rituals, a warm welcome from Miriam, a careful vetting by Cain and Abel, and a private audience with Gabriel himself. Yet, from the moment he set foot on the estate, Samuel sensed the danger that lurked beneath the surface. The smiles were too practiced, the kindness too precise. At night, he heard muffled cries drifting up from the chapel's depths, and by day, he watched as servants avoided the family's gaze, their fear palpable. Determined to uncover the truth, Samuel began to gather evidence. He memorized the layout of the estate, noted the comings and goings of the family and their associates, and listened carefully to the whispered conversations of the enslaved. He saw Dr. Saraphim loading crates onto a wagon late at night, the cargo too heavy and too carefully handled to be anything but human remains. He watched as Captain Fulton's men arrived under cover of darkness, their faces grim and their hands never empty. The tension within Seraphim's grace reached a breaking point. Samuel's investigation did not go unnoticed. Abel, ever vigilant, grew suspicious of the newcomer's questions and reported his concerns to Gabriel. The family convened in secret, debating how best to deal with the threat. Some argued for caution, others for swift and decisive action. In the end, it was decided Samuel would be taken to the basement, his fate sealed like so many before him. But Samuel was not without allies. Grace, Michael Whitworth's daughter, had begun to question the family's actions. Her encounters with Samuel awakened a sense of empathy and doubt that she had long suppressed. In whispered conversations, she confessed her fears and her guilt, and together they devised a plan to expose the truth. The night of Samuel's capture was marked by a storm that shook the very foundations of the estate. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the chapel in stark relief. As the family gathered above, Grace slipped into the basement, her hands trembling as she unlocked Samuel's cell. Together, they made their way through the labyrinth of corridors, pursued by the echoes of footsteps and the distant sound of vowels raised in anger. Their escape was nearly thwarted by Cain, whose strength and fury were matched only by his loyalty to the family. A struggle ensued, desperate and violent, but in the chaos, Samuel and Grace managed to slip away, vanishing into the storm-swept night. Their flight would mark the beginning of the end for the Whitworths, for the evidence they carried, and the testimony they would soon provide would shatter the illusion of sanctuary forever. In the aftermath, The Southern Redemption Society was thrown into turmoil. The society's secrets, once so carefully guarded, now teetered on the brink of exposure. The community, long complicit in its silence, was forced to confront the reality of the horrors that had unfolded in its midst. And the Whitworths, their power and prestige crumbling, faced a reckoning that would echo through the generations. Yet, even as the truth began to emerge, the shadows lingered. The land, scarred by years of suffering, held tight to its secrets. Angel's Rest Chapel stood silent, its stones stained with the memory of those who had vanished within its walls. And in the distance, the storm raged on, a reminder that some evils, once unleashed, can never be fully contained. The storm's fury had barely faded when the first rays of dawn revealed a landscape transformed not by nature, but by the weight of human truth finally breaking through the surface. The escape of Samuel Washington and Grace had set in motion a reckoning that could no longer be contained within the walls of Saraphim's grace. As word spread, abolitionist networks and local authorities converged on the estate, their resolve hardened by the rumors that had long haunted the marshes. What had once been whispered in fear was now spoken aloud. The time for secrets was over. The investigation began with a sense of grim purpose. Search parties, lanterns in hand, moved through the ruined chapel and the overgrown grounds, their boots sinking into the sodden earth. It was in the cold, damp air beneath Angel's Rest Chapel that the first undeniable evidence was found. Behind the altar, a hidden door yielded to careful hands, revealing a labyrinth of stone corridors and iron-barred cells. The stench of rot and old blood clung to the walls. The silence was broken only by the echo of footsteps and the distant, mournful call of a night bird. What they discovered was more than any had dared imagine. Ledgers bound in cracked leather, their pages filled with names, dates, and chillingly precise details of each victim's fate. Diagrams of the underground network. Maps marked with escape routes and safe houses, many now compromised. Their keepers betrayed. Letters exchanged with distant medical schools, written in a cold, clinical hand, discussed specimens and deliveries as if they were nothing more than cargo. According to contemporary reports, the ledgers alone catalogued over 1,800 souls. Each entry a silent accusation against the family and their collaborators. Forensic teams, working by the flickering light of lanterns, uncovered surgical instruments, shackles, and preserved remains mute witnesses to the suffering that had unfolded in the darkness. The walls of the cells bore desperate scratches, names carved in hope and terror, and stains that no amount of time could erase. Testimonies from survivors, their voices trembling but unbroken, painted a picture of systematic cruelty. They spoke of Miriam's gentle deceptions, Cain's silent menace, Abel's relentless interrogations, and Dr. Sarif's cold, methodical experiments. Each account was a thread in a tapestry of horror, woven together by the family's unyielding belief in their own righteousness. The evidence was overwhelming. No longer could the Whitworths hide behind their reputation or their wealth. The community, once so eager to defend them, now recoiled in shock and disbelief. The illusion of sanctuary was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a house built on suffering and betrayal. As the investigation deepened, the pressure on the family mounted. Interrogations were conducted in the very rooms where so many had suffered. the echoes of the past mingling with the confessions of the present. Grace, her conscience finally unburdened, provided a detailed account of the family's operations. She described the rituals of welcome, the methods of interrogation, and the fate of those who were deemed expendable. Her words were punctuated by tears and silences, the weight of guilt pressing down with every memory. Samuel Washington, though weakened by his ordeal, stood before the authorities and recounted his journey through the labyrinth of Saraphim's grace. He spoke of the coded ledgers, the secret meetings, and the network of collaborators that stretched far beyond the estate's boundaries. His testimony, corroborated by the physical evidence and the accounts of other survivors, left no room for doubt. But it was the confessions of the Whitworths themselves that brought the full scope of the horror into focus. Gabriel, stripped of his composure, attempted to justify his actions with twisted theology, insisting that he had acted as an instrument of divine will. Miriam, her mask of charm shattered, wept as she described the pleasure she had once taken in the suffering of others. Cain and Abel, confronted with the evidence of their cruelty, fell into sullen silence, their bravado replaced by a hollow emptiness. Dr. Saraphim, ever the scientist, spoke dispassionately of his experiments, his words chilling in their detachment. The scale of the crimes was staggering. The ledgers revealed that more than 1,800 souls had passed through Angel's Rest Chapel, their lives extinguished in the name of profit and power. The correspondence with medical schools implicated respected institutions in the North, exposing a web of complicity that reached far beyond the borders of South Carolina. The testimony of survivors and accomplices alike painted a picture of a society willing to look the other way, so long as the machinery of wealth and order continued to turn. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community. The Whitworths, once revered, became pariahs overnight. Their allies distanced themselves, their fortunes evaporated, and their name became a byword for betrayal. The Southern Redemption Society, its secrets laid bare, dissolved in a flurry of arrests and denunciations. Those who had profited from the family's crimes now found themselves hunted by the very system they had once manipulated. Legal proceedings began in earnest, the weight of evidence too great to ignore. Gabriel Whitworth was charged with murder, conspiracy, and a host of lesser crimes. Miriam, Cain, Abel, and Dr. Saraphim faced similar indictments, their fates entwined with the testimony of those they had once tormented. The trials were a spectacle, drawing crowds from across the region, each eager to witness the fall of a dynasty that had once seemed untouchable. Yet, even as justice was pursued, the process was fraught with difficulty. The Whitworths' influence lingered in the shadows, and not all were willing to see the truth brought to light. Witnesses disappeared, evidence was tampered with, and rumors of bribery and intimidation swirled through the courtrooms. Still, the sheer volume of proof ledgers, letters, physical remains proved impossible to suppress. The verdicts, when they finally came, were both a relief and a disappointment. Gabriel was sentenced to death, his final words a defiant invocation of divine justice. Miriam and Dr. Saraphim received life sentences, their futures consigned to the darkness they had once inflicted on others. Cain and Abel, their roles deemed less central, were imprisoned but would one day walk free. Grace, her cooperation and remorse taken into account, was spared punishment, though she would carry the burden of her family's sins for the rest of her life. The aftermath of the trials rippled through the community. The estate at Saraphim's grace was abandoned, its buildings left to rot beneath the weight of their history. Angel's Rest Chapel, once a symbol of hope, became a place of dread, its stones stained with the memory of those who had perished within its walls. The local church, complicit in its silence, faced a reckoning of its own, its pews empty and its coffers bare. Yet, for all the justice that was served, there remained a sense of unease. The scars left by the Whitworths' crimes could not be erased by verdicts or sentences. Families mourned the lost, their grief compounded by the knowledge that their loved ones had been betrayed by those they had trusted most. The community, forced to confront its own complicity, struggled to rebuild in the shadow of the truth. In the years that followed, the story of Seraphim's grace became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of respectability and of the price that must be paid when evil is allowed to flourish unchecked. The ledgers and letters, preserved in archives and museums, served as a testament to the power of evidence and to the courage of those who dared to speak the truth. But the land itself, scarred and silent, remembered. The wind that swept through the ruins carried with it the echoes of prayers and screams, a haunting refrain that would not be silenced, and in the hearts of those who survived. The memory of the Whitworths' crimes remained a warning and a promise that such darkness would never again be allowed to take root. The collapse of what once stood as unshakable was neither sudden nor clean. It was a slow, grinding undoing, as if the very earth beneath Seraphim's grace had grown weary of bearing the weight of so many secrets. The land itself seemed to recoil, swallowing the remnants of grandeur and leaving behind only the bones of what had been. Where laughter and music had once drifted through the air, there was now only the hush of wind through broken windows and the low, ceaseless murmur of the marsh reclaiming its own. In the aftermath, the community found itself adrift, stripped of the certainties that had defined it for generations. The old order, built on rituals and reputations, crumbled under the pressure of truth. Those who had once gathered in the glow of candlelit parlors now avoided each other's eyes in the street, their conversations clipped and wary, the social fabric so carefully woven, unraveled thread by thread. Some sought solace in faith, others in denial, but all felt the chill of something irrevocable lost. The physical landscape bore the scars of this reckoning. The once manicured gardens grew wild, thorns overtaking the paths where children had played. The chapel's bell, long silent, hung askew in its tower, a mute witness to the passing of an era. Even the river, which had carried so many dreams and so much despair, seemed to flow more slowly, as if mourning the innocence that could never return. Yet, amid the ruins, there were signs of something new struggling to take root. A handful of voices, once silenced by fear, began to speak with cautious hope. They gathered in small circles, sharing stories and piecing together a future from the fragments of the past. The process was painful, marked by suspicion and grief, but it was also necessary. For the first time, the community was forced to confront not only what had been done, but what had been allowed to happen. The reckoning was not just with the past, but with themselves. Official records from the period note a marked increase in petitions for justice, for land, for recognition of wrongs long ignored. New leaders emerged, shaped not by lineage but by the courage to face uncomfortable truths. The old hierarchies, though not erased, were forever altered. The very language of the town changed, as words like trust and sanctuary took on new, more complicated meanings. But the process of rebuilding was haunted by the knowledge that some wounds would never fully heal. The absence of those lost was felt in every empty chair, every unclaimed inheritance, every unanswered question. The community's rituals, weddings, funerals, harvest festivals were now tinged with a somber awareness of what had been sacrificed, but with for the illusion of peace. The cost of silence, once invisible, was now etched into every face. As the years passed, the story of Saraphim's grace became less a tale of individuals and more a shadow that stretched across generations. The children who grew up in the aftermath inherited not only the land, but the burden of memory. Some tried to distance themselves, moving away or changing their names. But the past clung to them like the ever-present mist. Others became obsessed with uncovering every last detail, poring over court records, faded letters, and the cryptic notations left in the margins of old ledgers. Historians who visited the region decades later found a community still marked by unease. They noted the reluctance of locals to speak openly, the way certain topics were avoided, and the persistence of rumors about hidden graves and sealed archives. Some claimed to have seen strange lights in the marsh at night, or to have heard voices calling from the ruins when the fog was thickest. Whether these were the products of guilt, imagination, or something more, no one could say for certain. The fate of those most closely tied to the events remained the subject of speculation and whispered debate. Some vanished into obscurity, their names erased from family Bibles and town records. Others were said to have found uneasy refuge in distant cities, living under assumed identities, forever looking over their shoulders. A few, it was rumored, sought redemption through acts of charity or penance, but the weight of their actions was never fully lifted. Artifacts from the era rings, scraps of fabric, fragments of stained glass occasionally surfaced, unearthed by the plow or the flood. Each discovery reignited old questions and old fears. What else remained hidden beneath the soil? What stories had yet to be told? The ledgers, preserved in a locked cabinet in the county courthouse, became a source of both fascination and dread. Scholars argued over their meaning, their accuracy, and the motives of those who had kept such meticulous records. Some pages, it was noted, had been carefully removed, their contents lost to time, or perhaps to a more deliberate hand. The legacy of Saraphim's grace was not confined to the boundaries of the estate. Its shadows stretched into the laws that were rewritten, the institutions that were reformed, and the collective conscience of a people forced to reckon with their own capacity for complicity. The story became a cautionary tale, invoked in sermons and schoolrooms, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the seductive nature of collective denial. Yet, for all the efforts to understand and explain, there remained mysteries that refused to yield. Why had some survived while others perished? What bargains had been struck in the dark, and at what cost? Was there, as some insisted, a curse upon the land? Or was the true curse the knowledge that such things had been possible at all. The answers, if they existed, were as elusive as the morning mist that drifted over the marshes, here one moment and gone the next. In the quiet that followed the storm, the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a new story to begin. But the echoes of the past lingered, woven into the fabric of every day. The wind that rattled the shutters at night, the chill that crept through the fields at dawn, the uneasy silence that settled over the town at dusk, all were reminders that some shadows are not so easily dispelled. As the decades slipped by, the ruins of Saraphim's grace became a place of pilgrimage for the curious and the contrite. Some came seeking answers, others forgiveness, and a few, perhaps, simply to bear witness. They walked the overgrown paths, traced the outlines of vanished buildings, and left offerings, flowers, stones, whispered prayers at the foot of Angel's Rest Chapel's crumbling steps. Each visitor added a layer to the story, a new interpretation, a fresh question. Official records state that the estate was never rebuilt. Its land eventually absorbed into the wild. The marshes reclaimed what had been taken, and the river, indifferent to human sorrow, continued its slow, winding journey to the sea. Yet, the memory of what had happened there remained, a presence as real as the fog that rolled in each morning. In the end, the story of Saraphim's grace is not one of simple villains and victims, but of a community forced to confront the darkness within itself. It is a story of the fragility of trust, the corrosive power of silence, and the enduring need for truth, however painful. The evidence ledgers, artifacts, the very landscape stands as a testament to what was lost and what was learned. But perhaps the most haunting legacy is the knowledge that history is never truly finished. Each generation inherits not only the land and the laws, but the questions left unanswered by those who came before. What would you have done, standing at the crossroads of fear and conscience? How many secrets remain buried, waiting for the right moment to surface? And if the past is never fully past, what does that mean for the future we are building now? The ruins of Saraphim's grace stand as a silent warning, their stones etched with the memory of choices made and paths not taken. In the shifting light of dawn, they seem almost to breathe, as if the land itself is whispering, remember. Remember what was done here and why. For in the end, the greatest danger is not in what we know, but in what we choose to forget. And the most enduring curse is not upon the land, but upon the hearts of those who turn away from the truth. What stories still wait in the shadows, unspoken and unresolved? What price will be paid for the next silence? The answers, as always, belong to those who dare to look and to remember.